Hi, my name is Drew Vidano. I'm 22 years old. I live in Colorado Springs. I'm a trail runner and hopefully soon to be race director. I got into trail running when I was about 15 years old. We would always do an altitude camp up in Summit County for my cross country team. So we were entered into a local race there, and I placed third out of like some locals and my teammates. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. It was like a 6-mile race. So just kind of my first exposure to an official trail race. And from there, I started doing some smaller races through high school and looked into some longer stuff into college and post-collegiate. But that race was sort of my first official exposure to trail running. The first sense that there was an actual community around this and that trail running and racing was its own specific thing probably started around my junior senior year. I started racing Cirque Series, which is put on by Julian Carr. They do a circuit of races. One of them is in the Arapahoe Basin ski area. And so there were a lot of people at that race. There were some pros. I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of legit. I didn't know you could be like a pro and race trail. And then as I kind of progressed into some more races and some longer stuff, found out that there was, like a US series and like a World Series and Golden Trail Series. Obviously kind of Solomon, I think a lot of their media team has done a lot for like the storytelling aspect of the trail community. So I followed them a lot and kind of their athletes and the places they would travel to race and the stories they were telling, and just opened up a whole new can of worms for what trail racing is. And there are a lot of niches within the trail community, like sky running and ultra running and all these different types of racing that I never really knew about as like a sophomore in high school that I'm now like pretty interested in. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's not as much like an infrastructure, I guess, for lack of a better term, around the trail community like there is around, NCAA cross country or track or a lot of these like post-collegiate sports that you can get into as a professional. So the trail community is definitely like growing, but that, especially like 4 or 5 years ago when I was just getting into it, I'd say, there aren't as many resources for younger folks to look to. Or avenues, I suppose, to get into like professional trail running. Like I kind of had no idea until my friends started looking into like, I guess you can be a pro trail athlete. Like, is that a thing? Like, do you get sponsored by companies? Is that how you make money? Like, I don't know. Is there a team for that? And so you just like start asking questions and kind of digging. So that was probably like one of the bigger barriers for me, is just sort of a lack of knowledge and maybe a lack of understanding in where to seek out that knowledge or who to talk to. But now I think there are definitely some more role models, and like especially the ultra scene has seen some pretty significant growth. People like yourself or Jim Walmsley in the longer races, and Joe Gray. Like the Colorado Springs area has a lot of pretty big names, and so it's just easier to find those people like, hey, I raced against this like pretty legit person, I'll go say hi, I guess. And everyone in the community is like pretty humble and very approachable. So that aspect of it has been super cool, in that you can race with some legit people and just like have a very human conversation with them afterwards, and kind of pick their brain like, hey, how'd you get into this? Like, what's your story? How do you get to be where you're at right now, in a community that was traditionally a lot smaller and is seeing some growth? I work at a run specialty store. Our main thing to sell is shoes, but we like to at least say that the actual real thing that we want to give our customers is knowledge, whether it's about their next marathon or a trail race or how to fuel correctly or whatever it may be. But yeah, I mean, I think most run specialty stores have a lot of knowledge to give folks. So if you're ever just like unsure about kind of anything running related, go to one. There are a lot of resources there. A lot of run groups meet there. So, I mean, yeah, a lot of folks will be knowledgeable on obviously the shoes that they sell, and that probably includes trail shoes if you're in a mountainous kind of area. But also like how to fuel for races, because it is pretty different for trail races. I would say nutrition just kind of generally for endurance athletes is like a pretty key one to keep you from getting injured. Kind of strengthening and maintenance activities, those types of things can be sort of difficult to come by or hard to sift through on like the fire hose that is the internet. So folks that work in that space consistently will have a little bit more specific knowledge to what you are wanting to train for, or goals that you have in mind. Yeah, so my advice to the young trail athlete, like high school to early college maybe, especially if you're coming from like a cross-country track background, I would lean into those systems because they do teach you a lot about how to train and kind of a basis for consistency, because that does take you a really long ways, I think, in such a young sport. If you just like show up and put in the work 5-6 days a week, you're going to be better than a lot of people, which is encouraging. Like, it's always good to like be good at something. But I think also like go run stuff that is fun to you, because I wasn't always as good at cross and track as a lot of my teammates, but I loved the mountains and I'd kick their ass in the mountains and like that was sick. So it's like life is too short to not enjoy what you're doing all the time. So go like find opportunities to run that stuff, get into the community. You'll find a lot of folks who are open to running with you and just want to have a good time and maybe go on some fun trips. Like, I don't know, there's a lot out there to do. And then I would read, there's a book that I read kind of late high school, early college that really helped me with my training philosophy. Because I think especially like my experience on a high school cross country team at least was always like constantly competitive, whether it was like an easy training run, workouts, racing, like you just never not going to the well. And like there is a lot to be said for going slow, like most of the time. And slow is relative, but just like it will help, I think, keep you from getting injured as often. It helps your body a lot more with efficiency and that type of thing. But the book is Training for the Uphill Athlete. Patagonia published it. I think Killian was one of the authors, Killian Jornet. So there's just like a lot of good science backed in there. And it's very like digestible. It's not too sciencey that you won't understand it. So I'd read that book. Go find people to run with. And run alone a little bit too. Like, it'll give you some headspace to figure out your own body and what you want to do with yourself and your life. And I don't know, whether you really enjoy what you're doing right now or want to pursue something else. So, yeah.